So, theologically speaking,
hello, I'm Kyle Leon Henderson, and I'm here again with Father Ian Elliott Davis. Hello.
hello, good to see you.
Great to see you. We are in the third episode of Theologically Speaking, and I hope everyone has been enjoying listening to the episodes. We've been having a ball recording them. And today we're going to talk about the different types of theology.
Different types of theology, and there are many. There are as many different types of theology as there are people in the world, almost. Systematic theology, modern theology, postmodern theology, biblical theology, historical theology, the study of Christ, which is called Christology, the study of the church, which is called ecclesiology, the study of the last things, that is called eschatology. There's philosophical theology, mystical theology, Trinitarian theology, questions about existence, being, time. There's feminist theology, issues of gender, sexuality, Anglo-American theology, apophatic theology, cataphatic theology, process theology. Those are just the first few that I noticed.
Just the first few.
Those are the first few.
Well, we're not going to be able to talk about all of those today, for sure. So where do we begin? Like, how do you know what... I mean,
Right.
yeah, where do you begin with all that?
What is theology, to
Yeah.
start off with, I suppose is probably as good a place to start as any. I think I mentioned in one of the episodes, it's the grammar, the language, the common parlance that we use to talk about God and the divine and anything to do with God and the divine and the heavenly region, the eternal infinite mind of God. Anything to do with that is considered theological. Theology used to be called the Regina Scientia, the Queen of the Sciences, because it was understood that every subject, in fact, could be summed up neatly and precisely in the study of theology, if one could grasp what theology actually meant.
And there's probably still people on this earth today who believe that
Right. Well, I do,
everything
to a certain extent.
comes and goes from the Bible, and if it's not found in the Bible, it is not real.
Well, there is a truth to that, but there's also, as usual, while there's a truth to it, there's also something misleading about that, and it's important to try and distinguish between the different layers and levels of theology.
So in an effort to understand the concept of it all, does the church that we go to and churches of other denominations, do they use specific types of theology, or is all of that wrapped into what we do as Christians?
Different types of Christians have different types of theology, that's absolutely certain. And there's Jewish theology, there's Islamic theology, there's theology according to other world religions as well. So it's a multi-headed task trying to understand what it is. But for us as Christians, yes, it centers on the cross, on Christ, on the being of God, the nature of humanity, and the Trinity, I'd say. Those are all fairly basic kind of starting points for us to think about if we're going to talk about systematic theology. Now, systematic theology, it sounds a bit like the air conditioning system in your house, systematic. In fact, all it means is it's a thought through and a kind of a defined way of looking at theology. The other word that isn't used so much today for systematic is dogmatic.
I was just about to ask you if dogma is systematic theology.
You're streets ahead of me
I
already.
I'm sure. I was like, that sounds like a dogma. So, so.
Now, but
There.
you see, dogma and dogmatic theology doesn't mean somebody who's got a closed mind.
Mm-hmm.
Dogmatic in the old days meant of glory. So dogmatic theology was the study of God as related to the glory of God.
Mm-hmm.
Doctrine and dogmatic are from the same root.
Mm-hmm. And I do have an understanding of dogma.
Right.
But let's dive into that for like 30 seconds.
Sure. Dogma is from the Greek word doxa, which means glory.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the dogmatic theology is the theology that's to do with the glory that is revealed, the revelation of God.
And when we think in modern terms of a dogma, it's got a negative connotation.
Very negative connotation. Because
And should it have a negative connotation?
it shouldn't. It really shouldn't. And that's partly the fault of the late 20th century and the post-Enlightenment era. But dogmatic, really, we should... Wittgenstein used to say, if a word got sort of all muddied and dirtied by too much overuse, then it should be taken out of common usage and sent for a good old dry cleaning. And dogmatic is one of those words.
That's one of the words.
We should take it out of common usage at the moment, give it a good old dry cleaning, and then reintroduce it, and it'll be spick and span.
I think the modern connotation of dogma is that you will do it because your religion says you'll do it, and that's it.
Right.
And that leads to things like suicide bombings from other religions. That's where people think when they say, "Oh, that's just a dogma." They have to do something terrible because the religion dictates it, and that's not. And that just like you said, it's muddy and it's dirty and it's so like it's not even accurate to the point where it's not even the right word.
Right.
But we use it as the wrong word, and then dogma becomes a dirty word.
Well, it's like the word want in the 17th century. Want used to mean to be lacking something. If I was in want of a hat, it meant that I was lacking a hat. I needed a hat. And today we say I want something, meaning I desire something, which is quite a different connotation indeed.
What else is on your list?
Oh, well, I thought that we could perhaps just explore what some of the definitions of these are. Biblical theology, obviously, I hope people would realize, is to do with the Christian scriptures, the Old and the New Testament as we have them, or the Hebrew Bible in the New Testament as our Jewish brothers and sisters would have it. That's biblical theology. Historical theology is the study of theology through history. Ecclesiastical is the posh word for church. So ecclesiastical history is church history, and historical theology is understanding how previous generations have understood God and the mysteries of God, which kind of leads us into mystical theology, which is the whole kind of having visions, the gifts of the Holy Spirit, speaking in tongues, those kinds of unusual occurrences that we don't encounter every day at Ralph's, for instance.
Right. And how much validity is there in speaking tongues in the modern world? Because I believe that God showed up in people's lives in the history of the church. And he did lead people to speak in tongues.
Right.
If people claim to speak in tongues today, are they lying?
Oh, I don't think they're lying. No, I think I would never say that somebody is deliberately deceiving, because I think that the way the Holy Spirit moves in people's hearts and in emotion can lead people to ecstatic utterance. Now, personally, that's not my tradition. That's not where I would go to. That's not my kind of cup of tea, if you like. but I would never condemn that.
And I do want to apologize to anyone listening for the way that I presented that question. Are they lying? Because I was brought up in a religion where I was taught that that's just like that, or snake handling, or this or that. You know, it was just too much, not correct. And I've come a long way from there, so I want to make sure that I you know. But I did just spend a month in Alabama, so I guess some of it, you know, grew back. But I don't want anybody to think that would be disrespectful, and I hope that wasn't.
No, I know you, and I know you would never disrespect anyone's faith or their strongly held convictions. I know that you're a good person.
I
indeed.
Try. I really try. But this
You're
year's
very
tried us.
trying.
This year's tried us all.
Well, yes, but you're very trying.
I'm gonna keep going. At the feet of the priest, I will sit. Keep going.
Oh dear.
So yeah, how much with ecclesiastical history and or ecclesiastical theology and the historical theology, how important is it to keep doing what we've always done because we've always done it?
Well, now that's framing the question in a way that is interesting, because I would say theology is about discovering and finding new things and discovering new elements to the revelation, new insights that God offers in each generation. That's one of the great pluses of the charismatic movement, I think. That
what does that mean, the charismatic movement?
Well, that God speaks afresh and anew in each and every generation. And the Bible is not just a truth once delivered and is unchanging, but the Bible is a big, baggy elephant of a book that there is more and more to discover. You know, it's the famous story about in a dark room and you have an elephant and you have 5 different people, and one person's feeling the trunk and one person's feeling the tail. One person's feeling the front foot and one person's feeling the belly, and they each would say that the elephant is like this and only like this. Well, in fact, the reality is it's much, much bigger than any one person or any group of people are able to describe. And that's the same with God, and that's the same with theology. God is always going to be far, far greater than our ability to sum up the divine.
So what else? What's the next one?
What's the next one?
What's the next one?
Apophatic and cataphatic.
Ooh, those are words that I've never heard. So
You've never? Oh, okay.
Apophatic and capophatic.
Apophatic and cataphatic.
Oh, cataphatic.
Cataphatic.
Gotcha.
So apophatic. Well, let's start with cataphatic because
Okay.
that's easier. Cataphatic is positive theology. That's theology that affirms, that says God is light, God is truth, God is infinite.
So that really, really speaks to me because I have a coworker, or a former coworker, who I invited her to my New Year's Eve party, because I always have a New Year's Eve party every year, because I always say I want to have friends over with some champagne, maybe some beer or wine, or just some spirits to get happy and sort of reminisce on the year and talk about what we've learned, and then just be in a positive space to start the new year. And she said, not everything always has to be positive. And I said, for me, really, that is where it lies. The affirmative and the affirmational and the light. And I'm always seeking the light. So that really speaks to me. Is there a space in, say, our church, St. Thomas the Apostle? Is there a space where I can lean into the cataphatic theology, whereas others might not so much?
Yes, definitely. Most Western theology, that is in this part of the so-called civilized world, the developed world, most theology is cataphatic theology. It's affirming. But there is also the via negativa, apophatic theology, which is negative theology.
The via negativa is
the negative way.
via the opposite way.
Yeah, well,
No?
it's not exactly the opposite. It's let me say this, it's different. The via negativa is saying God is immortal.
Mm-hmm.
God is omnipresent,
Yeah.
omnipotent. I may have got that slightly wrong, but it's not defining God, but saying that God is beyond our categories and our definitions and our ability to sum up the divine.
I think everybody's done this thing that I know that I did, where you sit in church and you hear the preacher, whomever, delivering the sermon, and then you start to think about God has always been there and God will always be there, and then you will freak yourself out trying to wrap your mind around it, until the point where you just gotta.
There is no beginning to God.
You can't fathom it.
Right.
You just cannot fathom that.
Because we are so
We're finite.
We're finite.
So-
We're tied to time and space. I mean, people talk about free will as if free will means that we can do anything we want to. Well, we can't do anything we want to. I can't suddenly change into a rhinoceros, even if I want to. I can't be a rhinoceros.
Halloween is coming.
Halloween is coming, and I'd look good in a rhinoceros costume. I'm sure I would. But no matter how much I want something or how much I desire, it's not going to make something happen. People think that free will is the ability to just do anything they want to. Well, free will doesn't quite work like that. And God's will is not bounded in the way that our will is bounded. We are bounded by time and space. So we're limited. And we are finite. We are creatures who live for a set period of time here.
Or I guess our
Earth.
understanding of who we are is finite at this point.
Right. There's that
I will
as
say.
well.
Because,
Yes.
we're Christian. We hope to go to heaven, and we hope to have that, to be one with God at one point, at some point in our afterlife.
Yes. One of the great saints of the church, St. Augustine, said that our hearts come from God and that our hearts are restless until they find their rest, their true home, back in the heart of God. And that's the tradition of the ancient philosophers as well, that being, and I mean being with a capital B, not being with a small b, but being is where we are all from and where we will all return to eventually as well.
And so, apophatic theology, would that be sort of the what I know growing up as the fire and brimstone theology of hell is imminent, this is what's happening if you don't come to Jesus?
No. The apophatic theology, Pseudo-Dionysius, in the early centuries of the Christian era, he was one of the great writers. St. Paul, when he was preaching at Athens, at the Areopagus, converted one of the individuals there, Dionysius. And Pseudo-Dionysius, in some of his writings, claims to be that individual, but that's more a literary form. That's not necessarily the case. It's not...
Meaning that there are writings that claim to be from Dionysius,
Right.
but they are just in the style of Dionysius, not from his own
Exactly.
pen.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
That's exactly it. And his writings are the ones that are most influential in apophatic theology, and he talks about the divine names in terms of cataphatic theology, but also he talks about the way that God is not known, and God can only be known by unknowing. God can only be reached by not reaching out to him.
I'm trying to wrap my head around that concept.
Right. Well, it's
That. Or is that just something that I shouldn't try to do at a table within 10 minutes?
it's not something that can be achieved at any table in 10 minutes. No, that's quite right.
Is that the stillness?
Yes.
Or is that not?
Well, there's the whole Christian make us slaves so that we can be free. Make us poor that we can be rich. Make me, I will become the least of all. I will become the servant of all in order to be great. But of course, it turns all of the definitions upside down and inside out and back to front, which is one of the beauties of Christian theology.
And would you say, I guess just to kind of wrap up the cataphatic and apophatic theologies, we spoke in one of our last episodes about the middle way. What is the Latin term for the middle way?
Via media.
The via media. Is there a via media to be had between cataphatic and apophatic, or is it not it's not a concept that they go together?
They are related, but they're related in a very unusual way, and I am astonished that in the space of just 2 or 3 episodes, we have got onto the nexus between apophatic and cataphatic theology. That's incredible. Wow.
That's what happens when you get a curious Christian
Right.
together with a man who is begging someone to show up and ask him these questions.
I'm stumped.
Well, you know what? I mean, that's the thing. I'd realized that this episode, I think, is going to be for the listeners to hear where we could go, what we could do.
Yes.
Like everything we talk about today will probably have its own episode at some point.
Yeah.
And I hope that people are just like on fire to figure it out and know more as I am, because I
it's
can't
exciting.
wait.
You know, theology is what lights my candle. It's what keeps me going.
In the South, we'd say that's what blows my skirt up.
Like Marilyn Monroe. Oh
Yeah,
dear.
that's the subway. That's the A train.
Right.
For all the New Yorkers.
Oh right.
So what other theologies are on this list? Because I think we're gonna have to just put a pin in apophatic and cataphatic for a moment.
Sure.
We'll come back to it.
There's
at some point.
philosophical theology as well, which is an area that I'm interested in. I had a professor when I was a young priest called D.Z. Phillips, or D.Z. Phillips, we'd say here in the United States. He held the Danforth Chair out at Claremont Graduate University, but also held the chair at Swansea University in Wales. So 6 months in the United States, 6 months in Wales. And D.Z. Phillips was a great friend and a philosopher. And he studied under a man called Rush Rees, who was a friend of Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Ludwig Wittgenstein.
Wittgenstein, one of my great
He and I are going to
heroes.
be good friends by the end of this podcast.
He'd like you, that's for sure. He liked Southerners and cowboys and that kind of thing.
Oh, I can pull it off here because no one knows the truth. I'm not a cowboy.
Oh, you're not a cowboy?
Not at all.
Oh, you
I've
sound
never even ridden a horse.
Do they have cowboys in the South?
Not a whole lot, because we don't really have ranches.
Right.
Not really any kind of big... We have farms. So there's people who have horses. There's people who have... my family has a farm. So they raise koi fish.
Koi carp?
Well, like the big goldfish.
I'm too shy. I'm a koi carp.
And people are like in a Japanese pond. And I said, or the garden pond. I said, well, you put them in the lake... and they eat the gook off the bottom.
Ooh. So
that the cows and the horses that go into the pond or whatever will have clean drinking water.
Oh, right.
So.
That's good.
It's good for the ecosystem, but So is there... What?
Sorry. Yes.
I know. This is
Eschatology.
eschatology.
That's the last things. That's the theology of the last things. So
that actually means eschatology means the theology of the last things.
well, eschaton is the end of the age.
Eschaton is end of age. So eschatology probably reads Revelations real hard.
Yes. Revelations and Daniel, the book of the
Or I guess
prophet
Revelation.
Daniel.
We always say Revelations, but it's Revelation, right?
It's the book of... It's the... Oh, let me see. The technical term in the Greek New Testament is the book of the Revelation to St. John the Divine.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it's... It is singular, revelation to St. John the Divine.
Mm-hmm.
But we do say Revelations as well.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible begins with Genesis and ends with Revelations.
Mm-hmm. And so that's, I mean, is that
Adam
just
and Eve.
all the eschatology is all exploring
The last things.
last things will...
What will happen in the last days. And that's become a very popular kind of amateur study for some people.
Would you say that sort of kind of gets muddied into philosophical theology? Because I mean, it's a lot of metaphors in Revelations, and
Right.
it's a lot of, I mean, maybe not metaphors. I don't know. I mean, I guess
Well, yeah, it
the
is
7
meta-
horsemen are coming. I mean, if I see them walk up, I mean,
Right.
here we are, you know.
Oh,
So
yeah, well, then we need to be on the lookout.
luckily, we're about 10 feet from the church.
We're
I'm gonna
10
be on
feet
my
from the
knees
church, so
praying.
we're quite safe where we are. The 4 horsemen of the
the 4
apocalypse.
horsemen of the apocalypse.
Of the apocalypse,
7,
yes.
There's 7 something, right?
Oh, there's the 7 spirits
Oh, okay.
are at the beginning of Revelation.
I guess that's why I say it's all symbolic, because there's numbers
Yes.
and there's you know the actual being, the 4 horsemen, the horseman meaning something. Oh, Louis, he's giving himself a little shake, huh?
Yeah.
Oh,
he's
here he
always-
comes to
and-
give me a little lovin'.
Yes. He's
But yeah,
terribly
so
smelly.
what delve into the eschatology a little bit.
Eschatology. Okay, so Jesus came preaching the kingdom of heaven, that it was imminent, that it was about to occur. And the first followers of Jesus believed that... Louis, come here. Oh, he's deaf as well, you see, so he can't
He's
hear.
okay. I'm good with
Okay.
him.
So the first followers of Jesus believed in the imminent return
Mm-hmm.
of Christ, in the rapture, or the second coming, as
Yeah.
it's sometimes called. Though after the first generation of the followers of Jesus, they realized that wasn't happening quite that way.
Because is it true that they were sort of like, he'll be here any minute?
Yes.
Like
Yes,
a
St.
couple
Paul.
of months from now, he's showing up.
St. Paul in his early epistles, like
Mm-hmm.
1 Corinthians and certain of the other epistles.
And here we are, 2,000 years later, still waiting.
Still waiting. So St. Paul, you see the development in his theology
Mm-hmm.
from an immediate eschatology to a delayed eschatology. And that's something that fundamentalists have terrible trouble with, because St. Paul changes his mind in his epistles. And
I guess you kind of get old and you're like, well, maybe Jesus ain't coming right now.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, this is all, it's exciting. Like, I hope that everybody listening to this is getting kind of like hype about it, because I'm really ready for their questions. I'm
Right.
ready for those
Yeah.
questions. And that's something that these first few episodes haven't really had a lot of. And that's because we
how-
had to lay a foundation a little bit.
Right. How will people get the questions to us? Will they write in?
I
or do
think,
they-
well, Jeff, our co-executive producer, Jeff Clark Tosca, I think we're going to get them from Facebook, from
right,
Friends
right.
of St. Thomas, and maybe even St. Thomas the Apostle.
Oh, that'd be good.
on
yes.
Facebook, and maybe some other social medias too. But that being said, if you have a question and you have my email address, or you have my my Twitter handle, my IG, my Kyle L. Henderson is everything for mine. Send me the question.
Yeah.
if you have a burning question, go to St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood website.
Yes.
Father Ian Elliott Davis's email address is right there.
Yes,
That face.
www.stthomashollywood.org.
So yeah, but we're gonna make it very clear how to get these questions to us at some point, because this is the early infancy of this show. But I'm very excited to delve into all that, and there's even more theological studies than you have on your list. Rumination. So I think that's great. I can't wait.
Thank you.
Well, all right. Well, we're going to go and get you ready for Mass.
I need to get ready for Mass.
So we'll see you on the next episode where we'll be talking about the theology of suffering. Have a good day, guys. Theologically Speaking is a production of Church Nerds Productions. Executive producers for the show are Jeffrey Clark Tosca, Father Ian Elliott Davis, and Kyle Leon Henderson. Associate producer is Ed Tosca. Editors for the show are Kyle Leon Henderson and Jeffrey Clark Tosca. Music for this program is provided by Dr. Jeffrey Parola and the choir at St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood. We'd also like to give a special thanks to Louie for all the loving licks on the knee under the table while we produce this show. Visit St. Thomas the Apostle Hollywood Facebook page for more information on the show, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram at St. Thomas Hollywood.